Hello everyone. In today's lecture, we will connect the concept of elasticity to pricing decisions from revenue, taxation, and real-world market outcomes. Up to now, we have learned how to calculate elasticity. Today, we will focus on how elasticity actually affects behavior and outcomes in markets. Let's begin by visualizing elasticity on the demand curve. When demand is inelastic, meaning elasticity is less than 1, the demand curve appears steep, almost vertical. This shape tells us that quantity demanded does not change very much when price changes. In contrast, when demand is elastic, meaning elasticity is greater than 1, the demand curve is relatively flat. This indicates that quantity demanded responds very much to price changes. So the slope of the curve gives us visual clue about elasticity. A steeper curve suggests low responsiveness, while a flatter curve suggests high responsiveness. The same idea applies to supply. When supply is inelastic, the curve is steep, meaning producers cannot easily change the quantity supplied when price changes. When supply is elastic, the curve is flatter, meaning producers can respond quickly and significantly to price changes. So again, the shape of the curve reflects how responsive producers are to price. Now let's look at real-world patterns. Essential goods such as housing and electricity tend to have inelastic demand. For example, if the price of housing increases by 10%, the quantity demanded might only decrease by about 1.2%. This small response indicates inelastic demand. On the other hand, non-essential goods such as restaurant meals tend to be more elastic. A 10% increase in price might lead to a large decrease in quantity demanded, such as 22.7%. This tells us that the people are much more sensitive to price changes when the good is not a necessity. Now let's connect elasticity to total revenue. In some cases, the change in price affects firms' revenues. When demand is inelastic, consumers do not reduce their purchases very much when price increases. As a result, increasing price tend to increase total revenue. When demand is elastic, consumers respond very much to price changes. In this case, lowering price can increase total revenue because the increase in quantity demanded is large. Suppose a gasoline firm initially sells 10,000 gallons at a price of $3 per gallon. We calculate total revenue using price times quantity. So initially total revenue is $30,000. Now suppose demand is inelastic with an elasticity of 0.4. This means that a 10% increase in price leads to only a 4% decrease in quantity demanded. If the firm raises the price by 10%, the new price becomes $3.30. The quantity decreases by 4%, so the new quantity is $9,600. Now we calculate the new total revenue, $3.30 times $9,600 equals $31,680. Even though quantity decreased, total revenue increased because demand is inelastic. Now let's consider cost increases. If production costs increase, such as through higher taxes, the supply curve shifts to the left. The demand is inelastic. Firms can pass most of these higher costs onto consumers in the form of higher prices. Because consumers are not very responsive, the, the quantity does not decrease much and the burden falls largely on consumers. Now consider the same situation when demand is elastic. When supply shifts to the left, consumers respond very much to higher prices by reducing their purchases. As a result, firms cannot easily pass the cost increase to consumers. Instead, the main effect is a large reduction in quantity. So elasticity determines how costs are shared between consumers and producers. Now let's introduce the concept of tax incidence, which refers to how the burden of the tax is divided between buyers and sellers. If demand is more inelastic than supply, as consumers bear most of the tax burden because they are they are less responsive to price changes. If supply is more inelastic than demand, producers bear more of the burden because they cannot easily reduce productions. Let's look at this using diagrams. An excise tax creates a difference between the price consumers pay, called PC, and the price producers receive, called PP. This tax shifts the supply curve to the left. When supply is more elastic than demand, consumers are less responsive, so they bear a larger portion of the tax. This is shown by a larger gap between PC and the original equilibrium price PE compared to the gap between PE and PP. Now consider the opposite case. When demand is more elastic than supply, consumers are very responsive and reduce their purchases significantly when price increases. As a result, producers must bear more of the tax burden. This is shown by a larger difference between PE and PP compared to PC and PE. Now let's discuss time. Elasticities are usually lower in the short run than in the long run. In the short run, consumers and producers have limited ability to adjust. For example, it may be difficult to change consumption habits or production capacity immediately. In the long run, people have more time to adjust. Consumers can find alternatives and producers can expand production. As a result, quantities tend to respond more in the long run, while prices fluctuate more in the short run. In the diagram above, the intersection E0 between demand curve D and supply curve S0 is the same. The shift of the supply curve to the left from S0 to S1 is identical in both A and B. The new equilibrium E1 has a higher price and lower quantity than the original equilibrium in both A and B. However, the shape of the demand curve is different in short run, the left, and long run, the right. Even when supply shift is the same, the outcome depends on the shape of the demand curve. If demand is inelastic, the shift leads to a large increase in price and only a small decrease in quantity. If demand is elastic, the same shift leads to a smaller price increase but a larger decrease in quantity. This highlights how elasticity shapes market outcomes. Thank you so much for watching.